The global insurance industry is more than a market.
It's a movement powered by 3 million professionals around the world.
Together, we support communities as they rebuild after disaster.
Help businesses through risk and uncertainty.
Protect individuals as they plan for brighter futures.
This impact isn't possible without people.
That's why we attract, grow, and retain the very best talent.
Because when every voice is heard,
When every person feels they belong.
We don't just build careers.
We build a better tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds
Belonging builds
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from the world today. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate in this conversation. My name is Alan Holmes. I'm the Global Head of DEI at Clyde Co. But today I've got a far more important job, helping to facilitate a conversation around social mobility and how we design it in a way that drives purpose and partnership. I'm delighted to be joined by three fantastic speakers. Before I introduce them, just a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, to those of you who were intending to be here in person but have had to join online, my sincere apologies, but thank you for your flexibility and accommodating the changes at the last minute. Really appreciate that so many of you have still been able to join us online today, and looking forward to inviting you into the conversation. Of course, today's session is part of Dive In, the largest diversity and inclusion festival across the insurance market. And at Clyde Co, we're really delighted to be global festival partners for the second year running. Today's session will count towards your continued professional development, as the sessions are all accredited by the Chartered Insurance Institute. Just a reminder of some of the learning objectives overall for Dive In. What we want to be able to do through the conversations that we have today are identify effective methods to attract and retain talent, explain how the industry can collaborate to make itself more attractive and effective, and develop guidelines, actions, and opportunities to make an inclusive culture that empowers us all. Throughout the conversation today and on the screens, whether or not you're joining virtually or in the room, you will see a QR code, which will give you the ability to be able to ask questions to any of our panelists, which we will moderate later on today. But that's enough from me. I'm really delighted to be able to introduce our speakers for today's session. Firstly, the Right Honourable Justine Greening, the Chair and Founder of the Purpose Coalition. Secondly, Jamila Raymond, the Chief Operating Officer at 10,000 Interns Foundation. And finally, but not leastly, Andrew Kerr, a partner here at Clyde & Co, and also one of the biggest voices and advocates for our work on social mobility. I probably can't do your introductions, perhaps the justice that you can do it yourselves. I know our audience today would be delighted to hear more about yourselves and your roles within your organisations. So Justine, I was wondering if I could perhaps start off with yourself. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role at the Purpose Coalition?
So for me, my start is actually on the other side of the Pennines in Rotherham in South Yorkshire. Grew up in a really normal household, went to a local school, never planned to go into politics. Started off my career as a finance person, actually. I trained at Pricewaterhouse, having gone to university, and then just got involved in community stuff, actually. And so ended up ultimately getting elected in a slightly unplanned way. You know, this was not like a big life mission, but just absolutely loved being an MP, loved the ability to get things changed, to have people's voices heard, and have always felt really passionately about social mobility. You know, I know how opportunity changed my life, but I also know how much that was often just down to lucky moments, and maybe just those right people that happen to see something in me, and just feel like the more I can do to try and make it a level playing field and opportunity for everybody wherever they start, the better that is. And I think businesses have a massive role to play in that. And so the Purpose Coalition that I set up is really about bringing together brilliant businesses like Clyde Co that really care about this, but sharing their best practice, helping them to get further faster. And it's all about change on the ground. I think it's literally one organisation at a time and one life at a time. That's what I work on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Justine, and thank you very much for joining the conversation today. Jamila, I'd love to know a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Jamila Raymond, and I'm Chief Operating Officer at the 10,000 Interns Foundation. At the Foundation, we've been on a mission since 2020 to create 10,000 internship opportunities for Black students and graduates across the UK. Really excitingly, we're proud to say this year we've done it. We've hit our 10,000 milestone. I'll come on to that in more detail later. But we have been everywhere. We're across 35 industries, 1,000 companies, from the Scottish Highlands down to the Isle of Wight. We have created internships literally everywhere. We have the fastest growing pipeline of Black talent in the UK, which is another incredible achievement. But I think what's most powerful for us is being able to be the connecting point between really talented individuals and companies and organisations that want to make real change. And for us, employment is one of those levers into upward mobility, which should be accessible to everybody. So that's what we're trying to do. Looking forward to the conversation, and thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining us, Jamila. Andrew, how about yourself?
My name's Andrew Carr. I'm a partner in our catastrophic injury team here, which means I tend to deal with fairly grisly and unpleasant claims brought by individuals who suffered very serious injury. I mean, by way of my background, I just want to say I don't find my own personal story terribly interesting. So the idea that anybody else would beggars belief to me. But I was the first person in my immediate family who went to university. Then after that, they all went. My brothers went, and both my parents. I think they probably took the view, well, if he can manage it, then it can't be that difficult. And like Justine's point, there's an element of luck, good fortune, people spotting you, giving you a chance, giving you the opportunity perhaps to fall on your face, but hope that you don't, and also to just to support you on the way. And on a personal level, my wife and I do mentoring for young people outside of work. So although I'm very committed to it, and we as a firm, as a business, are very committed to social mobility. Clyde, on a personal level, we do it as well, just with sort of individuals that we know or get in touch. Being one of the touchline dads, or as was, watching my kids play sport, sometimes you get people come up and say, how do you get into doing this, or how would you go about doing that? So we've done that for a few years, and this summer, one of the lads that we've been mentoring, I suppose, is helping. He's got into university. He's going to Cambridge. He's going to do law. So he's considerably brighter than me. But it shows that the talent and the ability is there. They just sometimes you need a bit of a nudge, a bit of a guidance. And there's a young woman that we've been, supporting as well. She's got pupillage at Chambers, so she's going to go off and be a barrister. So it shows that, there is networking, collaborating, events like this, I think, just helping to point people in the right direction, because the ability's there. Sometimes people need to just point you in the right way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew. I wonder if we can maybe start the conversation by setting the scene, setting the context. And Justine, I was wondering if I could come to you first of all. If we think about social mobility as a topic and something that we're all collectively trying to push forward and address, why is this such an important issue? And perhaps from a societal perspective, why should we be focusing on driving change in this area?
I think whether you care about it because it's the right thing to do or the smart thing to do, it really matters. It's the right thing to do because it's an issue of fairness, isn't it? People just want to have a level playing field when it comes to access to opportunity. And I think most people are willing to work really hard, but they do want to feel like the rewards they get at the end of that are the same as for everyone else. And, that's certainly my attitude when I was growing up. I didn't want, a stronger ladder than anyone else. I just wanted the same rungs to climb up. So I think it really matters for individuals. I think it just goes to the psyche of how we all work. We're all willing to bust a gut if we think there's something, at the end of it. I think it's really important for communities and for our politics. And I think you've really seen in recent years a frustration and anger actually around lack of change, and people sense that actually there's some people doing really well, but that's a world that they are never going to be able to be part of, and it doesn't matter how hard they bust a gut. I think that's been the case for a long time, and actually this has never been a country that's had equality of opportunity, but it doesn't have to be like that. But I also think latterly we've really seen it impact on our economy. We literally waste talent on an industrial scale, and that's bad for everyone. I think some of the challenge on social mobility is it can feel like a zero-sum game, that if we open up this system and you know, your kid gets an extra opportunity, then my kid won't. Well, I just think that's wrong. More people having more opportunity is how we create more opportunities for absolutely everyone. And so there's an economic case for this, and it's crazy that Britain is now a place where there are these fantastic careers and companies can't find skilled people to go into them, whilst at the same time we've got people who, you know, can't afford some of the flats that are being built around here because they haven't got a job that means they're on a salary that enables them to do that. So, you know, the good news is we have tons of talent. We just have to find smart ways to start connecting it up, which is why the 10,000 interns is such a brilliant practical example of the fact that when we decide we're going to really focus on a particular area, it's amazing how much progress you can make in quite a short period of time, that changes lives. But we need everyone on board, and it's all of our responsibility and opportunity to be able to make a change. And I think that's what I find empowering. We can do this. It doesn't have to feel like it's beyond us. And just because Britain's been a place where we don't have equality of opportunity, it really doesn't mean it can't change for the future. You know, we get to decide what Britain's like going forward. And so if we decide we want it to be different, then actually we can make that change.
And I think something that's quite interesting for me is in a panel that are incredibly united behind the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here, you talked about that zero-sum game and folks feeling like giving opportunity to some is removing opportunity for others. We don't have to look too far in our own history. You just have to look at the weekend and see some of the demonstrations that were happening in London. Jamila, I'd love to come to you. How do we take collective action on this? How do we make this not feel like a zero-sum game? How do we empower everyone to feel like this is something that's going to benefit them?
I think ultimately the whole conversation needs to change. I think panels like this are really important, and you know, it's being live streamed, which is fantastic, but I think more people being part of this conversation and recognizing that it isn't individuals against individuals. It isn't one protected characteristic group against another. You know, there was a collective sense of not having enough, and therefore there does need to be a collective reaction to it. It can't be battling against each other. I think that the work that we do at the foundation, we're really proud of it because, as Justine says, it's more than 10,000 times employers have said, yeah, we'll take a chance on this person who maybe wouldn't have got through our CV review in the first time. And we've had loads of feedback saying that, you know, people who have come from our pool of candidates are outperforming expectations and really changing people's understanding of what those people from those backgrounds can do. So I think it's changing the conversation, it's giving people a chance, it's shifting the mindset into maybe I actually don't know everything about these people that I think I know everything about. But also, I think importantly, what I'd like to think about in this session is that the solution and the kind of pathways for social mobility can't really sit with an individual or even in one collective group. It really has to be a society-wide political, economic shift that makes those pathways meaningful. So yeah, looking forward to getting into that.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And I suppose reflecting on both of those topics, if you're able to start seeing the economic advantage of tackling this issue, and also, Jamila, you talked very articulate there about the benefit it brings in terms of the talent capability that you've got. Andrew, if I come to you as representing an organization, does it have the same benefit? Is this something that organizations should be focusing on as well?
Well, I agree completely. I mean, the short answer is yes. It benefits organizations tremendously. I mean, businesses are largely representative of society. We're a law firm that legal profession. It's a service industry. We need to reflect and be representative of the clients that we're working for, working with. As I said, it's not a zero-sum game at all. You look at any, historically, you look at innovation and progress and development that's made, and it tends to come from individuals or organisations where there's a wider and more diverse range of individuals, of inputs, of ideas, and that's how progress is achieved. So we're entirely supportive of that. I mean, if you want to sort of boil it down to, say, looking at, for example, by analogy, a sporting perspective, if you've ever had any involvement in team sports, or you've done any sort of team coaching or such, like, the bigger the squad you've got to pick from, the better the team you're going to pick, and the better you're going to perform. So that's it may seem a sort of slightly simplistic comparison, but society-wide, I think that's what we should be aiming to achieve, and that's something that we feel very strongly about here at Clyde. This is not a tick box exercise for us. This is something that we're very strongly committed to, and our clients expect it. Not just our clients, but clients across the professions and across business. They want to see this being done because they know it's the right thing to do as well, and it benefits us all.
So there's a clear business case from multiple angles. But let's explore what's stopping the progress around that. If we're all collectively saying there's multiple reasons and there's multiple benefits for addressing the issue, I think if we start thinking about what those barriers are, maybe we understand why progress isn't where we want it to be. Justine, I'd love to come back to yourself first, if that's okay. What do you see as being the biggest systemic barriers in actually addressing this issue?
I think maybe it just starts with almost the status quo. Just there's the power of inertia, isn't there? Actually, and it's sometimes hard to see a different version of the world to the one that you're used to. And maybe if it's a version that you've been really successful in, it's understandable that you might think things are fine. But I think the barriers are more employers needing to be involved, like Clyde Co. So we launched the Clyde Co Breaking Down Barriers report in Parliament, actually, a couple of months ago. But it really combed through everything the business is doing. And once, I think it's nearly 50 pages long, but when you see it together, I mean, it's really striking, just the breadth of internal work that happens. And it's great to see, some young people getting a chance to literally have a look around today, but also the external work that happens, the progression stuff that happens once people get into these opportunities. So more employers being more strategic is crucial. If I can have a couple of others, I think within government, probably, I can say this as an accountant, I think Treasury needs to change. It's actually terrible at valuing investment in human capital. And yet this is a century where it's all going to be about human capital in a world of AI. I think the other barrier, Alan, is we just don't measure this. And I spent time as Education Secretary, which was just a huge privilege to be in that role. But I had data coming out of my ears. I knew everything about every school, every kind of child in those schools, subjects, a lot. And yet we're literally spending 60 billion a year just on primary and secondary school talent development. And yet once that talent grows up and goes into the workplace, nothing. We just don't know what happens to it. And so one of the biggest barriers is just that black box. If we can open it up and start really getting a sense of the journeys of talent, you'll be able to see, where the pockets of best practice are. But I think you'd start to create more of a race to the top, because certainly someone, probably like people in this room today looking around, I think I always thought I should go and work for a blue chip company because I thought they were the best. And that's how I could show I was good, by getting a job there. But I think now I probably want to look for a great employer from a social mobility perspective, one that understood how it was going to keep developing me as a person after education and work on progressing me. And there's no data like that for people. And I think if you want the economy to work, you want great talent to go to great companies. You want the great companies to think, we'll have to get a bigger squad if we're going to win. So it's creating that virtuous circle. But I think we can do that. You could easily do some measurement I could sit down with the ONS tomorrow and do a data strategy for business, and actually it would be the first country to do it, and I think it would change things.
I think just even being able to describe the multitude of barriers that we face also signals the complexity of the problem, and part of the reason why we're maybe not seeing as much progression and movement as we would like to. But if we're able to identify all those individual barriers and really start thinking about the strategies to address them, then this work should accelerate. Jamila, you're working directly with the individuals who are experiencing some of those barriers. Does what we've talked about, does that play out in the experiences that you hear from people?
So completely that I was trying not to jump in as just like nodding, going yes. Yeah, completely. You know, I think that the barriers that we hear our interns and now alumni tell us that they experience range all the way from the kind of soft, intangible, you know, maybe I didn't shake their hand properly, or I said the wrong thing in an interview and therefore I was just kind of ousted, all the way through to literally not having mentorship and training once you're in the workplace, and just not being really being given that chance at real success once you're in post, let alone getting in post. So I think that, you know, we're talking about social mobility. I can't have this conversation without recognizing that the people that we support are compounded with that, often with racial discrimination and many other lenses put on them. And so there's a pressure to operate and act in a very specific way, but you've never been taught the rules. Yes, we work with students and graduates, but, you know, depending on the university you went to or the course that you did, you learn different things, you show up different places, different ways. And I think those have real impacts on how you can progress in the workplace or not. On this data point, again, I couldn't agree more. And although we've met our 10,000 milestone, what we want to do next is work with our 10,000 alumni and use them to understand what the young Black professional experience is. Who have you worked for? Have you got a promotion? What has your feedback been? Has your manager been a person of colour? Have you had a promotion in the last 5 years? Really understanding that experience of those 10,000. It will be the largest data set of its kind if we can get it. And we think that will be a real invaluable tool to catalyse a lot of these conversations with multiple intersections that we think can be really valuable. So we see the barriers. There's a whole range of them, but to think optimistically, I think that, yeah, the future's bright and where we can go from here.
Right, congratulations on the milestone. Did you expect to hit it this quickly? And what does hitting that milestone tell you about the demand for programs like 10,000 interns?
Yeah, so I actually only started this job in October last year. So I arrived in post and they were like, surprise, we're going to make this enormous next year. But it's been so exciting. And I think the team has so much to be proud of, as does our community of employers and interns and alumni. I think what's been most interesting, as I'm speaking to you know, people we work with as well as Clyde Co and other partners, is that while we've hit this milestone, the other outcomes and impacts we've had have been a lot more indirect and a bit more exciting in many ways. So we don't, like I said, we're all over the country. About 40% of our internship opportunities have been outside of London. So we are quite nationwide in a way that we're really proud of. 30% of people who've applied to our programme have come from the most deprived places in the country. So when we think about what these unlocked opportunities can do to give someone, you know, a leg up and a step into a career pathway they may not have otherwise known about, it's really tangible. 70% of our interns are still in full-time employment, 30% of which are in the same place they were interning. So again, through us and with our support, the retention really is incredibly strong. And those stats soar above benchmarks, you know, from other people who run similar programs. So while we are celebrating the 10,000 number, there's so much more underneath that I think tells much more interesting stories about the texture of our society and what the young people are facing and up against today. So more to come, but yeah, that's what we're celebrating at the moment.
Well, congratulations and some incredibly impressive stats. I think it's so interesting as well to see the impact outside of London. I think all too often the focus can be on the capital, and even being able to host today's event in Manchester, I think is a little bit symbolic. I'm already going off script here, so my apologies. But Justine, you talked about being incredibly data driven in the worlds that you've been involved in before. Did you see the same needs to have that focus outside of London as well? Was that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, certainly as education secretary, we were doing opportunity areas like tailored place-based work outside of London. But interestingly, when I started the Purpose Coalition work, I was really concerned that we'd get stuck in London. Now I'm actually thinking we probably need to tone up our work in London because it's been so good. at engaging businesses around the country, but I think it's maybe because they see the problem really clearly. So in a way, it is about lifting everyone, and and different places have different challenges. So we use a framework called the Purpose Goals, which is really inspired by a lot of work that I was involved in with the Sustainable Development Goals when I was Deputy Secretary. And so they're basically breaking it down to 15 challenges, some education, some connecting to opportunities, some those other barriers like digital divide, health and well-being, entrepreneurship skills. And so when we're working with Clyde, we'll look across the piece at where is Clyde focused, and what's interesting is just how many of those goals Clyde is acting on. But if you're in London, it's not that there aren't opportunities, it's the lack of connection to them. And education is, above average in a sense in the state system. That's very different to say if you're growing up in rural Lincolnshire or Blackpool or Oldham, where actually, maybe, or me in Rotherham, where actually there wasn't that opportunity on the doorstep. So it's having that more tailored approach for quite different challenged communities that is the key to success, but then recognizing that everyone's different. And so you've got a place-based element of this, and then you've got a people-based element. And you can say, well, that makes it sound really complicated. No, it's just real life, to be honest. So it's just life. It doesn't mean we can't, be sophisticated enough. There are companies all over the world today that are working in different geographies and catering to different customer segments. So you just need to think about it like that.
And Andrew, do these barriers connect with your own experiences? You talked in the opening about the work that you're doing in your own community around mentoring individuals and community members. Do you see the same barriers for folks?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, it's about opening doors and showing metaphors, but it's sort of showing pathways for people who might not think, well, this isn't the place for me. I can't see anybody who looks like me. I can't see anybody who sounds like me. It's all a little bit daunting. And sort of taking it back, several steps to say, you are not the only person who feels like this. Lots of people feel like that. Even people who you might think are part of, if you like, the sort of the establishment or on that sort of establishment type of pathway. And show that certainly as regards Clyde, but I think across more the profession generally, this is very, very meritocratic organisation. If you've got the ability to get on, then we want you to be able to get on. On a sort of micro level, helping people write personal statements, helping people to just understand, like you're saying, picking up sort of the soft social tics, the social signs, the interview preparation, and sort of skills like that, and how to sort of present yourself in a way that attractive to an employer. Sounds like a sort of slightly trite phrase, but to say you come across in the best way possible, and to perhaps look beyond the immediate horizon and actually realise you can go an awful lot further and a lot better than you may have thought previously. And organisations like Jamila's and like Justine's are fantastic for that. I mean, doing it on your own, and I know we can sort of talk about collaboration and such like later on, I suspect, you can go some way on your own if you're trying to help someone, but you can do an awful lot more if you're part of a team.
And I think that's already taking us into starting to think about the solutions and the activities that employers can really build on in terms of being able to address these issues. And I suppose that's where I'd like to focus most of our conversation for the rest of the time together, is what are the practical things that organizations can really be doing in order to drive this agenda forward. Jamila, I'd like to come to you first, if that's okay. I mean, you're like we said before, you're working very directly with the individuals who are benefiting from programs. What do you want to see organizations delivering?
So I think that what's really important, particularly, I've been talking about intersectionality and different groups of characteristics as we've been talking here today. I think prioritizing equity over equality is what's really important in understanding how to have the right response to the right group of people to allow them to thrive. I think that, you know, the intervention that we provide and that we have driven and created and are really proud of at the 10,000 Interns Foundation is very specific for a very specific demographic group. We aren't trying to claim it will work for everybody, but it's working for them. And so that we've found an equitable, tailored response that's successful. I think many people could do with interrogating that a bit more. I think really, I'll come on to this later as well, but I think really prioritizing the psychological safety of different groups of people and understanding that, again, on that theme of equity, different people will need certain different things in the workplace, by which I mean maybe somebody will thrive if they have a certain mentor. Maybe some people will not want a mentor, want a buddy. Maybe they want a buddy, they'll want to be in an ERG. I think understanding what will make this person feel like this is their home and feel like this is a place they can thrive and be for a really long time. Yeah, that psychological safety element, particularly from people from minoritized backgrounds, is really, really important in the workplace. I'd also emphasize just when you're working with really young people, let them make mistakes. With our interns, we work so often, they'll, you know, turn up late on the first day, or they'll forget their laptop for the first week, and, you know, just allowing a lot of space for error. That's what the very first job you have is for, I believe. You get stuff wrong, you ask questions, you look stupid, and you learn and you grow and you get better. I think if you don't allow that space to be green, then we never give anyone a chance to really go up and up and up and figure things out themselves. So they're my first thoughts.
I mean, I love giving people space to make mistakes. I went on holiday for a week and forgot my password, so I would love the same grace that we're giving other individuals as well. Justine, do they connect with you? What would you like to see in the arsenal of solutions that organisations can deploy to move this forward?
So I think first of all, businesses need to think in terms of a plan, like a proper strategy, rather than just hoping we make some progress on this. Because, you know, I think as the 10,000 interns example shows, if you do something piecemeal, that's still positive. But actually, if you start to make sure it's more connected as an overall strategy, then you just have more impact. And so I think the way to think about it is almost you're building a talent pipeline, a pro-social mobility talent pipeline. So you're looking at what steps you're putting in place. And that stretches right back into communities in terms of your links with local schools. One of our recommendations actually in the report was around even for Clyde looking at primary schools and building on some of the work it does already in communities. So imagine you're building a pipeline. You're trying to get as far upstream as you can. You're looking at what happens when people come into the organisation. That kind of, those transition moments are always high risk for all those reasons, that it's a change of situation and that's when things tend to go wrong. But you're also then looking beyond that to the sort of getting on point of, can we really make sure we're supporting people not just to get into some of these fantastic businesses? And I think for law in particular, that has probably been a challenge, you know, almost a lot of focus on getting in, less kind of success on getting on for the longer term. But, you know, this is a nice problem to be facing, you know, the fact that you're starting to really crack getting in, now you're on to getting on. So I think it's building the pipeline, but then it's the people side. So you've almost got this architecture that you want to try and put in place, but then checking who's in it. Because the risk is you can have built these fantastic programs, but actually the people who are coming on them aren't really going to necessarily broaden you out into that wider squad, as you would put it. And I think it's when you get both of those things in place, then you can really start to make progress. But if you look at some of the stuff that Clyde is doing, you know, some brilliant stuff in volunteering, great stuff in schools, some fantastic work, you know, with women in prison, you know, pro bono work, so taking almost the talent, expertise in the business and offering it out to the community. You know, there's such varied steps, actually. I think that's, in a way, for me, why, you know, Clyde is an exemplar on this. And you know, I'm not just saying that because I am here. I think it has a genuinely comprehensive approach that then bleeds into what it does internally within the business. And it will absolutely make it a stronger organisation on just every single level, because it sort of sets the tone and the culture for what kind of team it is here. And I think it's a team that, you know, is matching the priorities of a wider country. It's as simple as that. So that's bound to be your most successful strategy, and it's bound to make it more of a place where other people want to come and work. I just think it's a win-win for not only society but for Clyde. Why wouldn't you want to do that? So lots of solutions here. Anyone who's watching this and wants some practical solutions, just go and find that report on. You can either go on the Purpose Foundation website or the Clyde website, find that report, and it's got some really brilliant examples of practical steps that are being done in an organisation like Clyde that make a difference. So just pick them up. Bolt onto some of them, whatever you want to do. I guess my final message would be make a start. So sometimes, again, it feels overwhelming and you're like, oh, well, I can never do all the Clyde stuff. But just make a start. Pick a place, pick some particular people and see how you get on and just go from there. It doesn't have to be perfect at the beginning. Just take a step forward is probably the most important thing to think about doing.
And in a moment, Andrew, I'm going to come to you to explore some of those practical steps that we've got at Clyde. But I just want to kind of highlight, I think one of the things that you've said there, Justine, which I think is incredibly useful. You started by talking about the need for a strategy. And I find it so interesting that when organizations are facing any kind of business problem, we are incredibly effective at being able to do a risk analysis, a needs analysis, and create a very clear commercially driven strategy. And I think all too often in spaces like this, which feel more cultural and sometimes feel more intangible, aren't approached with the same degree of rigor. And I actually think one of the most beneficial parts of our partnership together has been the development of the Breaking Down Barriers report, because that gives us a really clear blueprint to address a wide range of barriers and know whether or not we have solutions in place that are really going to drive our culture forward within the organization. And like you said, there's some great learnings in there, but also there's some great opportunities for us all to be doing more and learning from other organizations that have participated in those similar reports. Andrew, for you, what have been some of the biggest successes that we've looked at as a firm?
Well, just picking on your last point, I would say there shouldn't be a clash between the cultural strategy and commercial strategy. I mean, they become one and the same. Your culture, your commerciality, and clients see that. We see that, and I actually think it's. I think it slows you down. I think it acts as a bit of an anchor, really. If you divide the two, I think you should see them as one and the same. I mean, what we've done here, we've undertaken a number of initiatives, which goes from having just people through the door to start with who may not or would not have considered applying for, approaching, coming to work on an internship or on work experience with us, all the way through to having careers, to having qualification here, and now becoming lawyers working for the firm. And I should say, a sort of mental sort of post-it is that although we're a big law firm, it's not, there are opportunities for people just outside of law. I mean, some of the most senior people in our firm are accountants, for example. We have HR, we have IT, we have admin. So it's not just, it's a law firm, but there's a lot more going on beyond that. But we use the LIFT program, which is Legal Insight for Future Talent, which has engaged with and brought in young people from Black heritage who have had the opportunity to do paid internships, paid work experience here with mentors, training, upskilling. It's sort of a very early stage. It's even before their careers start, but it's with a view to sort of showing them that actually, there is a route through for you here. If you choose to pursue it, it doesn't have to be with Clyde, but it's maybe going off script there or off message, but it's within the profession generally. I just sort of feel it's important that the profession and society sort of extends, if you like, sort of the boundaries and the viewpoint for people like in that way. 10,000 Black Intern Foundation we've worked with is fantastic. We've had some wonderful people through. I mean, I'm really chuffed that 10 now have got training contracts with us. Now, anyone who's applying to try and get training contracts with a firm like Clyde or Big Law or solicitors firms generally, it's not easy. It's difficult. We're a meritocratic business. We're a meritocratic profession. So to be able to get on like that and to get in like that is, you've done very well, but you've deserved it. You hear a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome and such like. But it's perhaps easy to say you shouldn't have it, but I'd cast that off. If you're in here, you're in here on merit, and you've deserved it. We also have the apprenticeship scheme here, which we do, which we have people who are, and there's a couple in my team, and they're outstanding. They're really good, and they're key members of the team, and they work on my cases with me. And frankly, they organise me more than I organise them. But they'll work 4 days in the office and then have a day's study leave, get their degree, and then we'll do the same ratio, if you like, to get their professional qualifications, and they'll qualify into the firm. So if it's an alternative way in that is. I'm a huge champion of that, not just for sort of apprenticeships for law, but apprenticeships in that way generally, because university can be a daunting prospect socially and financially. This is the way to learn on the job and earn as well whilst you're doing it, and you come out with a qualification at the end. And frankly, you're probably more match fit when you're qualified, and many of your peers who may have come through a more established route are who've gone through sort of the university route, if you like, and haven't actually had this sort of hands-on practical experience. And we have the Open Door Initiative today, so welcome to everyone who's joining us on that. And we hope, it is the start of a programme and a pathway for you to a career that you want, that you choose, that you may not have perhaps thought would sort of automatically open itself up to you in the way that, perhaps those with a greater sense of entitlement might feel. But we're really pleased to be working with you. We're really pleased that you're here, and we hope you get as much as possible out of it. So I suppose encapsulating what we try to do is the programme from, say, getting in, so first foot through the door, coming into a building, an office like this, to helping people sort of travel through to qualification and a professional qualification, being a solicitor working in firms such as ours, which takes a long time. It takes years. Let's not pretend it's a short journey, but it's a rewarding one. And we're very, very pleased to be able to offer that support and be able to achieve that with you.
And I think there's such an important message in there that I just have to underscore as much as I can. I think in a world where this type of work is in the press more than ever, I think it's so important that what you sometimes hear is that programs like the ones that we're involved in are about lowering the standard. It is not that. It's about casting the net as widely as possible, because what I would want anyone to know who's received one of those training contracts from Lyft or who is on our apprenticeship program is they are just as good as the people that they're sat beside, and they have worked incredibly hard. They it goes back to that equity point that we were talking about before. It's not the equality, it's the equity that becomes really important. And I think for me that is just such an important point to hold dear in all of the conversations. That you're nodding away. Is that something that connects with you and resonates? Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, good. I just want to remind everyone of the QR code that you will see in the room and on the screen for any questions that you would like to pose to our panelists. For those in the room as well, I'd also just encourage you to use the QR code to make sure that we can get to those questions. Before we do that, I'd love to explore. We've talked really at an organisational level as three very distinguished leaders in your own fields. What would you want other leaders to take away as advice and guidance for what they can be doing to move this forward? Justine, I wonder if I can come to you first of all.
I'm going to be a strict record. I just think get a plan. It is as simple as that. We're all in leadership roles in our own way. whether individually, wherever, most of us have impact on other people around us. And so how we decide priorities, how we conduct ourselves in showing this as a priority really matters. And I think that's important. But I think for people who get more senior, it's never too early to start aiming for that wider talent pool, that more diverse team that you want. And I certainly think for people who are looking around today, getting a sense of this place for the first time, you're going to be pursuing a career in a world where being a business leader involves being good at all of this stuff and knowing how to do it well and having a CV actually and track record that shows you can reach out to that wider talent pool. So although it's not been a priority, I think wrongly for Britain, maybe over the last several decades, in the past, it will be in the future, because actually companies that can reach into that wider talent pool can not only just find it, but develop it and hang on to it. They will be the ones that succeed. They will be the ones that investors want to invest in. It's just an economic case that is why this will end up dominating and succeeding. So actually learning how to do that and how to do it authentically as a leader, tapping into why opportunity means something to you and what your story is on this. Maybe you've had lots of privilege and that's why you understand why opportunity matters. But whoever you are, I think working out for yourself how you want to make this happen is absolutely essential. And I find it fascinating. I spent such a long time in politics. Politics is becoming way more like business because it's all about delivery. And if you don't deliver in politics, then voters are going to find someone else who can. But equally, business is becoming a bit more like politics. You have to lead. You can't just manage to a bottom line anymore. For you looking around today, you're part of a generation that wants to work in companies that stand for something. And I think that's right. But how you lead those sorts of organizations, the kind of people that inspire me that I come across in business, there's such different leaders to maybe the ones that I was in industry with 20, 25, 30 years ago. So yeah, you might as well learn those skill sets now, because that's what's going to be, asked of you for your careers in the future. That's how much I think it matters. Why not use your leadership role to make a difference? I've never understood why you wouldn't want to have the best team, the most diverse team, zinging off one another. Those places are the kinds of places that I've always wanted to work, where I can kind of get off the leash and innovate and be myself. I don't want to have to change when I go into a business. I want to stay me and succeed. And I think those are the companies that will do better in the future. So lead your business to be one of those.
Jamila, how do you want to see people using that leadership role?
Everything Justine just said, but also I think it's important to remember that and you touched on this, but the leadership and the power that we have as individuals doesn't stop when you walk out of work. Mm-hmm. And I think that just to take it in a different direction, and again, picking up on scenes from the weekend and kind of the tone right now, there's so much we can do just in society, just by contributing, just by showing up. Andrew's talked about mentoring people on the sidelines of a football match. Like, there's conversations, whether it's a coffee with someone that messages you on LinkedIn, or it's just a chat with somebody in the library, who knows? I think volunteering in our communities is what's going to save our communities. I think showing up, for vulnerable people when they need it, is what's going to really help those people feel empowered and feel safe. And again, I think that is ultimately what's going to lead to that collective action, which will allow this whole social mobility thing to become real outside of beautiful offices like this one.
Andrew, you're obviously demonstrating your own capability to use your leadership. Is that what you want to see from your peers and your colleagues as well, or would you like to see something different?
I'll stop blushing first. I think in terms of leadership, if you're looking to try and engender change in a business, the first thing you've got to do is start. And you've got to make the decision you're going to start. You need to then, I would say, well, what is it we're trying to achieve? What tangible outcome here? There's no point just being a talking shop. So that would then mean looking inwards. So you need to sort of then understand, well, by perhaps talking to your staff, talking to your colleagues, what are the barriers, what are the difficulties, what are the things that we need to overcome, how are we going to do that? And I think it's just so important to come back to the point about collaboration and partnership, because you can go so far on your own with enthusiasm and such like, but if you partner up with organisations like Jamila's, like Justine's, they act as force multipliers for what you're trying to achieve. It amplifies your voice, it makes you go further. It opens doors for us as businesses to be able to sort of walk through and talk to people here and get feedback and say, well, you're doing this right, you're doing that, that's not so great, you could do this better. You've got to be prepared as well to take a few knocks on the chin. But I'd say you need to focus on what it is that you want to achieve, what your practical, tangible outcomes are going to be. It's more than just changing your banner on LinkedIn or whatever for a month because it's that month of the year when, for whatever reason, it's got to be something you're doing every day. And it's like Jamila says, essentially you've got to live it and deliver it that way. And if you do that, then you will achieve that kind of change.
So let me get to a few of the questions which I think are around those real kind of practical strategies. I'm interested in knowing, we're obviously talking to an audience that I'm going to assume are predominantly bought into the concepts and the ideas and are looking for that practical guidance. There's obviously a need for us to have that conversation in wider society and bring on board people who maybe aren't inclined to think of this as an important issue the same way that we're talking about it today. What tactics and strategies can we use to engage folks in the conversation who would choose not to come to an event like this?
Self-interest is, jumping in, is often a very good motivator. If you can demonstrate to an individual, to businesses, this isn't zero sum. This is not about saying, well, somebody from this background is now going to get a shot at it, which means you're not. No, a rising tide lifts far more boats. And if you're talking to people in commerce generally, whether it's professions or what have you, you're saying, well, we're going to sort of help. The intention is, and it sounds very almost sort of highfalutin, if you like, to say we're going to try and improve society, but in your own little way, that's what we want to try and do. And everybody benefits from that. And I think, you widen your talent pool generally, you widen opportunity, equity of opportunity as well, to people. Then people are going to feel more as though they're part of something. They feel they're going to be more part of the society. They're going to feel as though they've got some investment, however you want to interpret that, in society, in the profession that they're in, or the trade that they're in. And it creates a ripple effect, and hopefully they'll pass it on as well.
Jamila, Justine, anything you would add to that?
I mean, we talked already about the business case being so strong, and we're not just talking about people who can understand the business case, but I think when people start to really feel the benefits of the things that we're talking about, and when it comes back to them and it's tangible, it really is quite powerful. And I think that so much of conversations like this can often feel really far away and so theoretical. But all we're talking about, as Andrew says, is everyone getting lifted up and everyone getting a little bit more and being able to share and see and be happier and just a bit more peaceful in society, ultimately, is I think what we all want. I mean, I think that although we have this, like I said, very pinpoint initiative trying to deliver this very specific intervention, we aren't trying to work with people who don't want to work with us, ultimately. We're seeking the champions and the organisations who are already on this path, who are willing to make really transformational change, like Clyde Co, who want to invest and show up and put their brand and their voice and their face to the agenda. And that's what's going to catalyse this work, not going around trying to convince everybody that they need to get on board. Because my view ultimately is that this is happening. We're going in this direction. Join us and be part of making it really powerful, or just stay quite upset until you eventually join us anyway. So I think there's an inevitability to the direction of this work, and we should be excited about that, but also keep being loud and proud about it.
But I think they'll fall behind as well, those who don't join it.
Absolutely.
And they'll go with it. I think they'll flourish with it. more committed and integrated with this programme. Sorry, I jumped in.
No, please do. Justine.
So totally agree with all of that. I also think it's just hugely rewarding on a personal level to see the progress that you can make on this, and the people that you mentor and how it changes them. And there's something incredibly satisfying about seeing someone just blossom through not a huge amount even of your time, but just the fact that you've helped them think for themselves about how they get forward. So I agree. I think, change is happening. It's as simple as that. But I also think on a personal level, getting involved with all this stuff is massively rewarding. And that's something, if you haven't sussed out, then try it and you'll find out.
And it feels to me as if it's almost this convergence of industry, of community, and of organisation coming together and agreeing to work together. And I think it's that bit that we talked about at the very beginning, like the purpose behind it and the partnership in it, which has the most amount of potential to propel us forward. In everything that we've talked about today, if you could leave everyone with just one piece of advice, and this might just be reiterating something that you've already said, but I think it's really important perhaps to underline some of those points. What is it that you would want everyone to leave this room remembering from today's discussion?
Oh, well, I'm going to do two things, actually. So if you're watching this and you're part of an organisation, then try and steer it to have the biggest possible impact it can. If you're not sure what that looks like, take a look at the Clyde impact report, because it's probably as good a place to start as anywhere. If you're one of the people sat in this room who's getting shown around, this office, then I would say, coming back to the imposter syndrome point, embrace your imposter syndrome, because it's actually probably a really good sign that you are breaking new barriers in your own life, that you're out of your comfort zone, which means you're learning. Or it might be that you've just walked into the room and you're the only person who looks like you in that room, in which case somebody needed to be there like you first. And you're not just breaking barriers for yourself, you're breaking some barriers down for everyone else. So these are good things. Run towards them, because they're probably the best moments of your life when you look back, because that's when you're really having an impact for yourself and for everyone else. So yeah, aim high, because I think changing Britain for me, I think when I look back on my journey, I almost had to fix myself first. So go aim high for yourself, because once you can get there, then you can start changing it for everyone else.
I would say the short answer is start. The long answer is, I think that if you're somebody that you are looking for pathways to benefit from social mobility, from upward mobility, you want to find initiatives that can help you, find them. They exist. There are so many initiatives out there right now, and this is one of the indicators for society going in the right direction. There are programs, support, all sorts of things that you can sign up for that will help you make that catalytic first step on your social mobility journey. If you already think you're at the other end of the spectrum, you're in a privileged position, you're a leader in your organisation or elsewhere, give back. Start by doing something that will support other people. Again, volunteering, mentoring, anything. But as long as people start by doing something and take something, that's how I can start to change.
Thanks so much. Andrew, how about yourself?
Completely agree. Again, if you're someone who's looking to get into the profession or professions generally, there are a lot more organisations or a lot more ways now of doing that. So start on that journey, and there are, maybe from the outside, a business like Clyde's, which is a large international law firm, might not, it might seem somewhat intimidating, but there are loads of organisations like this one that are, we're really keen. We want to hear from you. We want to work with you. We want to engage with you, and we want you to come and work with us. And on the same point, I'd say, people who are perhaps leaders in the room as well, who are wondering, I'd say again, start. Look internally about what it is you want to achieve, partner up, collaborate, and then just go for it. You're going to make a few mistakes on the way. To me, it says everybody. has a few stumbles on the way. And I can tell you now, I still have a few stumbles on a weekly basis at work, and I've been doing it for goodness knows how long. So don't be worried about that. Don't be afraid about that. We want you to succeed, and certainly on a local basis at Clyde. Clyde, we'll mentor, we'll train, we'll partner you up. We want you to progress. We want you to get on. We want you to get in, and lots of other organisations want to do that as well. So I'd again say to the potential leaders out there, take that route as well. Get people in, get them on.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. I know we didn't get the opportunity to get to all of the questions, but I hope that becomes an inspiration for the conversation to continue outside of this room. I know all of our panelists would love to hear from anyone who has joined the event today. Just as a reminder, I will also say that today's event and participating in it counts towards your continued professional development, and the session is accredited by the Chartered Insurance Institute. And all that's left for me to do is to say an absolutely huge thank you to our guest speakers for today's session, and thank you to everyone who has joined us online and in person as well. I wish you a good rest of the day and a good rest of Diamond Festival, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.